Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later, as today we're checking out this lad, and he looks hot, hot, hot. Yes, this is of course the new Studio Series 86 Hot Rod, and I think just about everyone on the internet and their mums has been banging on about this thing recently, because apparently it's quite amazing. Now before we begin, it is worth me mentioning that this review comes courtesy of TF Source. I'll put a link to their site in the video description below, in case you want to check out this guy, or any of the other merch that they've got available, hey? So look, full disclosure at where I'm at with this guy, because, I don't know, I've been a little bit resistant to it, to be completely honest. I think there's just something about my brain that when everybody is going, oh, this thing's really cool, you should definitely check it out, that just kind of, somewhere in my head, it just kind of goes, no, I don't think I will, actually. And, I don't know, it's just like the inner rebel in me or whatever. So it's, you know, it's taken me a little bit of time to kind of think, yeah, okay, no, I'll give it a go. I'll see what all the fuss is about then. And I think part of that is that I'm a big fan of MP28, the masterpiece, you know, and MP9, you know, MP9 Hot Rod, and of course the 86 original and the Target Master. But you know, particularly the two masterpiece toys, they get a really bad rep, and I just cannot understand it, because they're both great toys. I mean, MP9, at least for its part, you know, had some QC issues on release, and I do think if it hadn't had that, it would have been fine. Do you know what I mean? It would have been a lot better received than indeed it was. But both of those toys, I stand by them. They're great toys, and it kind of pains me to see people saying, oh, you know, at last, this is kind of like a masterpiece, and just, I don't know, we'll see in hand today. We'll do some comparisons, and we'll make an honest appraisal of that statement, and see where we get to. But I am up for it. Fingers crossed that, you know, this guy turns out to be as good as people are saying that he is, because, you know, who doesn't love a good hot rod? Now, the box is actually fairly nondescript, just sort of a big window on the front, and then a little bit of, you know, toy photography on the back. Nothing really to write home about there. However, there is always a thrill to seeing them use the official Transformers the Movie 1986 logo. That is the logo from the film, very specifically. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And I believe lurking inside this plastic prison, there's a bit of a cardboard diorama thingy going on as well. So we'll definitely have a look at that today. But I suppose if we must, we best check out the actual toy, eh? I mean, you know, it's a tough life, but what are you gonna do, eh? These things got to be done. Right, well in the box you get some pretty cool little accessories with him, and you get these two guns just here. That's actually fairly common for hot rod toys to come with dual pistols, but still. You get his little pizza cutter accessory just there, which of course he uses in the film to kind of free Cup from the underwater squid in that sort of particular scene, very memorable. And again, there's an equivalent piece that comes with both MP9 and MP28 out of interest. However, he also comes with a little matrix, and that's actually not too standard for hot rod toys. That's something MP28 doesn't come with. And then you get a couple of blast effect pieces and a little kind of matrix kind of effect piece as well. So that's you know, it's pretty cool. But you know, then you get the toy itself, and you know, it's looking okay, I suppose. Right, and here he is straight out the box, and yeah, looking pretty nice actually, gotta be said. He definitely looks like hot rod, so that's, you know, kind of the minimum requirement is ticked off at least. But you know, a lot has been made about kind of look at this guy, the proportions, things like that, and I can see what people are talking about. So, you know, all joking aside about being grumpy or whatever, it's you know, it's definitely a very pretty toy, and he does clean up really nicely as well in terms of you know, kibble and things like that. I mean, just looking at him from a side view, you know, there's really not a lot going on there that you could kind of you know, quibble about in terms of you know, backpack and things like that. You know, even from a rear view, it's all pretty tidy, isn't it? And yeah, I think from a general look perspective, I really like it, I have to say. I mean, obviously it's, you know, in terms of comparing it to the couple of the masterpiece versions, we'll do that in a bit, and we'll bring in one of the G1 toys as well, but certainly it's got the kind of cartoony look, you know, from the film or whatever. I do think that there are some departures. You know, it's a little bit more detailed than I might have anticipated in certain areas. You know, got a little bit kind of greebly detail going on the hips and things like that, and on the shins, whereas, you know, I do kind of like the very clean look that you get on things like MP28, for example, and indeed MP9, but still, I do think that this presents very nicely. The proportions particularly are very good. Now, one element that I do also think works really well on this toy is the head sculpt, because yeah, it's pretty nice. You know, it's interesting because it is quite different actually to MP28 in a lot of regards. I mean, you know, some of the Generations toys, recent ones, have kind of cribbed off masterpiece toys, you know, things like Prowl, pretty much a dead ringer. This, obviously, you know, Studio Series is a bit of an unprecedented one in many regards, but you can see here that they've really kind of done it from the ground up. And I think it works really nicely. It's got a bit more of a kind of square chin than the Masterpiece, you know, rather than the kind of slightly elongated face that thing has. But it does work really well. Darker color, maybe, like the grey. I kind of prefer the lighter one, if anything, and I do kind of wish that the eyes were a little bit more saturated, you know, the blue, because they don't actually pop all that much versus the faceplate. It's kind of, the faceplate's almost too dark and the eye is not bright enough, but still, it looks really good overall. Just coming down to the chest, and of course you've got that flame emblem just here, which looks about as good as you'd expect. I do kind of miss the outline that the Masterpiece version has. I just think it helps to make it pop a little bit more, but this still looks really decent. Sadly, I do have a couple of little paint scratches on mine already. Just, I mean, I noticed them in the box, just one there, which actually, you know, is quite fairly prominent in hand, but the more slightly egregious one for me is where the line is, the curve on his chest. You know, there's a kind of clear little bit of paint rub or something going on there, so that's a little bit unfortunate. But the shape of the chest is really good as well, and I know for a lot of people, you know, that was a disappointment on the Masterpiece. It had kind of a, you know, a flat chest, and they will definitely prefer this in that regard. Of course, he's got elements such as his signature little blasters on his arms, things like that. You know, on the Masterpiece they were chrome, but really that was a bit of a disaster for a lot of people because the chrome had a high propensity for wear and kind of, you know, actually kind of flaking off a little bit, so that's unfortunate. But yeah, no, here it looks good. They're a little bit stubby, if anything, not quite as stylized as I'm sort of used to, but still, it looks okay. Very prominent spoiler on this guy. You know, it's spoiler alert, but no, it kind of really sticks out. Very spiky. I like it actually. It kind of gives him a real definition. It's again, it's maybe larger than I would have anticipated for this design. You know, so it does stick out a little bit, but I think it looks good. I already kind of mentioned some of the greebly detail that you get on areas such as the hip flaps just there, so you can see what I'm talking about. You know, it's absolutely fine. It works well. It's not entirely screen accurate, you know, because he's not as detailed as that in the cartoon, so they have kind of invented some of that greebly detail, which, you know, I could live without, but it's fine. And it's a bit sort of similar story really on the front of the legs I've already mentioned, and you know, you can see all of that there. And you know, again, it's something that would have been just smooth in the cartoon, so I feel like they have kind of invented that a little bit just for this toy. So I guess it's a bit of a stylistic choice. You know, do you like that look, or you're not so keen? I think it really depends. Yeah, it's up to you. And of course, a lot of people are going to be looking for this guy to kind of fit in alongside their Generations or, you know, War for Cybertron collection. And in that regard, I think stylistically it's going to work quite well. So maybe, you know, maybe it's something that people will prefer. Now, one thing I've heard as a common complaint of MP28 is that too much stuff ends up in the backpack, and, you know, you could kind of shove some of it in the legs, as it were. And clearly that's what they've done here. As you can see, the back of the legs are, well, they're very kibbly, aren't they? Let's be fair. That's where all the kibble kind of ends up. And it's not bad, like it's okay, but it does kind of stick out a little bit from the side. So, and some people, again, I'm sure will prefer that, you know, versus having a larger backpack up top. For my money, it looks a little bit unclean, but you know, considering the price point and everything that they're doing with this toy, it's really not a major grumble by any means. And you know, the trade-off being, as I say, this very tidy little backpack going on there, because there's really not a lot to write home about with that. It's a great job. You know, they've kept him very kind of streamlined up top, and yeah, it works. And you know, on the whole, he does a great job at representing the character. I mean, I do feel like he's a little bit more stylized. He's not, you know, what I would say, you know, kind of ripped from the screen or anything like that. There's definitely a bit of kind of departure going on in certain sort of stylistic references. You know, again, that spoiler is a little bit larger, so it kind of, you know, creates a slightly different silhouette. He's quite stocky as well. I mean, he certainly feels very different to MP28 in a lot of regards. You know, and that's, I'm not just talking about the kind of, you know, the typical kind of expectations that you would have of a Generations figure versus a Masterpiece. You know, just stylistically, the kind of the feeling of him, the proportions, things like that. They're two very different toys. Well, let's talk about articulation anyway, because you do get quite a lot. Now, firstly, the head is very freely moving, can look up and down a little bit, side to side, all of that good stuff. Shoulders will come up quite far. They do look like they're going to impede slightly on his head. I mean, that looks a little bit uncomfortable to my eye, but still, it works perfectly fine. And there's a nice little click, actually, kind of a ratchet just at the last point to kind of keep them tapered into the sides. So that's, you know, that's pretty cool. There is not so much a bicep swivel, but just at the shoulder, they will, sorry, at the elbow, beg your pardon, they will kind of swivel just there. So that's, you know, a bit of an unusual one, but actually it helps to not kind of create that visual break in the upper part of the arm, so maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a good thing. And at the elbow, you get a decent bend, like so. Then there is actually a bit of a wrist swivel, so that's good. And there are also articulated fingers. They're all on one piece, and the thumb is static, but still, again, for the price point, I think that's really, really quite decent. Then coming down to the lower half, there is a waist swivel just there, so that's good. No ab crunch or anything like that. Now you do have, I said hip flaps earlier, but they're not actually hip flaps because the legs move up like that, and the kind of hip flap goes with it. It's all part of the same piece. And I really like that solution. I think that's way more preferable than hip flaps. You know, I have a bit of a thing about hip flaps. Now, what I will say is that there is a bit of give in these joints at the hips. It's not so bad actually. Like, it's okay, but I just feel like they could be a bit tighter. Do you know what I mean? They kind of feel like they're sort of like rattling a little bit. So it doesn't seem to be a major problem, to be fair. So I'm not going to grumble about it. Now, there is a bit of a tilt just there at the hip also, and then for the legs, for the knees and what have you, you get quite a decent bend. That bit's come out the back. But very, very decent bend actually at the knee. Goes well past 90 because it's on a double joint just there, so that's good. And then you do get a bit of ankle tilt and toe articulation as well. So all told, pretty good. So yeah, you can get some decent poses out of him. I mean, he's not like so super fluid and articulated as a lot of Masterpiece toys, obviously, but in the Generations arena, I think he comes off very, very well. You know, he can do a very convincing kneel, which is great. You know, little articulated hands, wrist swivel, that's really, really appreciated. So I do find that this bit, the shoulders, are just slightly, not cumbersome, but just kind of the way they kind of rotate up. It does sort of obstruct his view a little bit, and you know, I guess that's because of the kind of top of his shoulders goes past the sort of height of his chest, so maybe there's not really much that you can do about it. But yeah, I don't know, it kind of feels a slight bit awkward in certain poses. But on the whole, it's really good stuff. And whilst he can't quite get into a full run, you know, he's definitely you know, poseable enough, fun enough to kind of pick up and play with, I think. You know, there's a lot to like here, definitely about the way that it handles. It's yeah, it's good for sure. Now, what is starting to grate on me a little bit though is this, this panel here, this red panel, absolutely will not clip into place, as you can see. It just pops out every time. I've tried it like I don't know how many times already, but yeah, even trying to sort of unfolding it, getting it to kind of sit more flush, it just will not go. So it just keeps popping out. I think it will do the whole time. The other one's absolutely fine. Sits really, really flush, no issues at all. This one just will not go. I'm also finding that the backpack comes untabbed on mine quite easily, sometimes just by like rotating the arms a little bit. There you go, just kind of pops out. So it's not a major problem, but just needs clicking back in, that's all, because otherwise this is going to happen quite a lot. But hey ho, hey ho. Now, in terms of accessories, the first thing to mention is, of course, his dual blasters, which fit very securely. They just literally peg into his hands, just kind of slot in. Obviously, it's just kind of rounded hands that he's got. And what is nice is that he has two differently molded guns. I mean, as I say, it's exceptionally common for Hot Rod to have two guns, and actually it's very, very common as well for them to be differently molded. It happened on the original 1986 toy, it happened on Masterpiece MP28, MP9, so it's not uncommon at all, but I am still surprised that for a Generations release that they went to such kind of, you know, such an extent, which is really, really good. And I know it's Studio Series, so you're going to get a little bit more bang for your buck, but realistically it's still in that kind of Generations arena. And I think it's still nice to see them just going that extra mile. You know, those little touches, they're appreciated. I mean, besides all that, it's still really exciting to see Hot Rod dual wielding his weapons. I do think that it adds a lot to the kind of posability of this guy, and you know, how good he looks and all the rest of it. Yeah, it's definitely working for me. And then you can also add on these little blast effect pieces if indeed you wish. They look really, really quite cool. Kind of blue, sort of rubbery plastic. This one's slightly bent actually, but it's really not a big problem. I think it's a nice touch, and I think, you know, those little weapons effect pieces, they're always fun, aren't they? Let's be fair. Now, of course, he can also wield those little pistols on the sides of his arms, his cannons or whatever, and in order to kind of complete that look, you're going to want his little kind of visor thing that he wields in the movie. Now, in order to get that out, you need to kind of flip up the top of the head and then just rotate it round and down over the eyes like that, and then close it all up, exactly like on MP28 actually. And lo and behold, it looks pretty good. I mean, you can still see his little eyes through the kind of slightly translucent plastic, so that's really, really nice. I think it looks good, it works well. A lot of people had a grumble with that on MP28 because it was, you know, slightly fragile. Fingers crossed this will wear a little bit better over time, we'll have to see. I do wish though, I will just say that actually folding the arms up like that, I wish they just folded out slightly or fanned out slightly more to the side, like they're just kind of stuck a bit statically like that when in a sort of upright position, but not a big deal, it's just a slight want of mine, that's all. Now you can also use those blast effect pieces on these little guns as well, on his arms, and yeah, I think that looks really good. I mean, actually I think they are kind of more designed for that part. It is where they show them going in the instructions, so although you can clip them to the guns, they look a little bit more purposeful here, to be fair, and yeah, nice touch. Next up, you have functionality in both his hands, which is pretty cool for different kind of accessories. In this one, you just have to kind of fold out the bottom of the arm like so, and then twist it round, and then you get his little kind of, almost looks like a little gas canister thing, doesn't it? It's the little kind of sparking tool, welding tool that he uses for fixing Cup in the movie, again, just after the underwater battle. So that's it's nice functionality. I really like how that's integrated, just kind of seal it up there. So that, you know, works very well. I like it. It's a nice little touch. And this one does exactly the same kind of functionality in that you just fold down this panel, rotate round the hand, he says. There we go, just gonna have to get it, a little bit of clearance, and squish it back up again. But then with this one, of course, that's the little nub that you need in order to attach his pizza cutter. And this is a little bit stiff to get on, but when you do, there you go. Now it's a little bit stiff actually, it doesn't rotate quite as freely as the one with MP28, but do you need it to? It's absolutely fine as it is, I think. And it is just worth me saying that I do think for the price point that this guy's at, they have crammed in a lot of stuff, you know, different molding on the hands even, stuff like that. It's good, you know, they've really kind of gone to town with it and paid a lot of attention to the various gimmicks that could be found from the movie, so nice stuff. Now you can actually store, in a bit of weapon storage, you can actually store both guns on his backpack as well, so that's pretty cool. It's a little something. And then if you really want to, you can go ahead and tab in, it's a little bit fiddly, but you can just tab in the pizza cutter thing on top of the guns, like so as well. And it's a bit of a choice look. I don't know if that's something I would be doing all the time, but hey, there you go. Now next, of course, or last, you've got his matrix accessory, which just kind of clips into his hands very nicely, actually. You just kind of loop it over the thumb and close up the little fingers like so. And actually it fits pretty securely. And it's a neat little thing actually. I mean, it looks better from this side because the other side is just kind of hollow, so it's really kind of meant to be displayed the one way. But you know, it's got a nice little bit of translucent plastic in the middle, some gold paint applications on there. Yeah, it looks good, I like it. I mean, whilst it might not sound like the biggest revelation ever to have a Hot Rod toy that can actually hold a matrix, they haven't all been able to do it over the years. So, and this guy, I think, actually does it better than any of them in that regard. So, you know, it looks really, really good. And there is additionally this little weapons effects piece. There we go. Oops, if you can get it to clip on properly, that is. But it just kind of clips over the front, and it looks pretty good, actually. It kind of has the old shining matrix effect, and I like it. Then, of course, you get this cardboard inner packaging from the box, which you may not think much of, but of course, it's got this little diorama setting just there. That's actually the inside of Unicron, where Hot Rod has his little battle with Galvatron at the end of the film. And then, of course, you can bring in the toy and kind of complete the look.
You got the Arise, Rodimus Prime. Optimus.
Nowhere to fit the matrix inside the chest mine, but is that a big problem? I don't think so. It's a feature that is on MP28, but a lot of people grumble about it. It's not something I ever use particularly. I do kind of like it on that toy, but equally, I don't miss it here, I've got to be honest. So anyway, let's do some comparisons with this robot mode. Well, firstly, here he is with a couple of the more recent Earthrise lads, including Sunstreaker and Ironhide from the Autobot Alliance 2-pack, and I think he fits in pretty well, actually. I mean, obviously, height-wise, he's just like a smidge taller than Sunstreaker, but not quite as tall as Ironhide, like almost getting up there, but just not quite, which I think, you know, for most people is going to be in the right kind of ballpark, isn't it? And stylistically, I think he fits in pretty well as well. I mean, he's got the kind of same kind of greebly detail on areas such as the legs and what have you, but there are also differences. I mean, this being a studio series release, it's definitely more involved. You know, it's got more going on in the way of kind of joints and things like that, and I don't know, it feels a bit better generally. Like these, if I'm honest, these two guys, Ironhide and Sunstreaker, are the two that I've been a bit more, you know, kind of more, you know, about in the Earthrise line, just kind of feel a bit lackluster. So definitely, by way of comparison to them, Hot Rod is looking pretty good. And then here's a bit of a comparison to two different versions of the Siege Sideswipe mold. Anyway, you've got Gigawatt, the Transformers Collaborative Back to the Future release, and you've got Tigertrack, who many will know I'm a big fan of if you've seen my video review of that toy. However, he's since had a bit of a makeover with some Toy Hacks labels. I did a bit of a gallery for Toy Hacks there, and the labels themselves look absolutely fabulous. So if indeed indeed that intrigues you. Of course, there are plenty of photos up on toyhacks.com, well worth checking out because it's a really, really nice set in both modes, actually. And I've done a few more galleries for them and doing a few more coming up as well, so that's pretty exciting. They do good stuff generally, and they do obviously lots of repro stuff for old toys and sets for new toys and all kinds of good stuff. Just go and check it out, toyhacks.com, so there you go. But yeah, I do think that in terms of this comparison, Hot Rod looks pretty good with them. He's definitely stylistically more sleek and kind of going for more of a kind of cartoon accurate vibe. Whereas of course the old Sideswipe mold is a little bit more kind of stylistic, you know, kind of a bit more kind of modernized and whatever, but still works well enough. And then of course you've got to have a comparison with the old Robo Dad, don't you? This is Earthrise Optimus Prime, and yeah, I think that looks really, really good. Really, really good together. You know, it's interesting because actually the little red bits on his legs kind of matches up, if anything, to the little bit of grey, the grey bits on this dude's legs. You know, it's kind of the same sort of departure. But yeah, actually, I think height-wise, everything, they look really, really good together. I'm sure most people will be very satisfied indeed with how they pair up.
Out of the way, Hot Rod!
And then, of course, you've got him here with the original Hot Rod, the 1986 version, although it is actually a reissue, to be fair. But yeah, I think they look very interesting together. Interesting to see how it's roughly the same height, not quite as tall. I guess I say that because I always kind of think of G1 Hot Rod as being fairly sizable, and actually the Studio series in my hands kind of felt smaller, but yeah, randomly they're the same size, so there you go. But that's, what is that, sort of 35 years difference. That's what that gets you in terms of toy engineering and everything else. But that's that's not to be at all disparaging of the original, because I love the original. And in fact, if I were to kind of completely let go of my entire collection, it would probably be one of, if not the only toy that might remain. It's that kind of beloved by me. So yeah, there you go. Then of course here we have him with MP9 Hot Rod, or Rodimus Prime. Actually, it does do Rodimus Prime as well, but this is, you know, with his Hot Rod face on. And I love this toy. Absolutely love this toy. Like I have nothing but nice things to say about it. I had the original, you know, the version 1, which was unfortunate in terms of some of the QC. And I always acknowledge the QC point because it's the first thing people think of when this toy is discussed. This is actually the version 2, and there was a subsequent reissue, which I've also owned. Those two, this one here, the version 2, and the reissue, no issues with them whatsoever. Do you know what I mean? Very, very solid toys. The backpack clips in well. No issues, genuinely. And in that regard, I do think that this guy is just spectacular, absolutely spectacular. And it's really interesting to see the two of them together. For me, this guy, MP9, that is the perfect looking Hot Rod in many regards. You know, I'm not saying it's a perfect toy by any means, but it looks spectacular. I just think it's gorgeous. What can I say? It screams Hot Rod from the screen. And in that regard, you know, I can see this guy's a bit more of a stylistic departure, but still, it works really well. You know, the Studio series, there's a lot to be said for it. And, you know, for a kind of a mini, much simpler thing, it's nice. It's really, really good. Then, of course, you get right to it with these two. And this is MP28 just here. And this is the comparison that a lot of people are making. You know, a lot of people are looking at this Studio Series toy and saying, well, it's, you know, superior to the Masterpiece or not as good or whatever they're saying. I don't know. But, you know, the point is there's a lot of comparisons between these two particular figures being made. And I can understand why, because, you know, realistically, MP28 here is, of course, the kind of more recent modern take on the character that we've seen, kind of screen accurate. So in that regard, maybe it's inevitable. I think what is interesting is that they look completely different, you know, and actually, you know, just coming back to MP9, this guy is also very screen accurate in the way that they deal with the legs, things like that, you know, the kind of smooth detailing, etc. I know a lot of people, again, are kind of a bit disappointed on this with the flat chest, which the Studio Series version does have, so they definitely stylistically, you know, they have their strengths and weaknesses. I would like to see, actually, a chest more like that on MP28. I mean, you know, it's never bothered me, but it is, you know, there is a nice curve to it, definitely. I do see the appeal in that. But there are a lot for me. I do like the clean legs on MP28 again. I think it's probably worth, you know, just kind of turning these guys to the side and of course acknowledging that definitely the Studio Series toy handles the backpack a lot better. I mean, that's really, really clean. But again, the trade-off is having all of that kind of junk on the back of the legs. So I don't know, a lot of people will prefer that as a solution. For me, I do kind of like the clean legs. The backpack has never bothered me on MP28, sincerely, but I understand that it will some people for sure. So I don't know, for me, do you need to kind of decide which is better? I don't know, really. Like, for my money anyway, they're both good toys. Obviously, we're yet to transform the Studio Series version, so we'll check that out in just a minute. But, you know, they do different things for me. I do really like the kind of really fantastic articulation on MP28, and definitely, you know, it's a different price bracket, so of course allowances have to be made, and the articulation is good for a mainline toy, what is essentially a mainline toy, but still, you know, the articulation on this dude is not as good as MP28. So it's horses for horses, realistically. I don't think you can definitively say this one is better than the other, because they both have some strengths to them, I would say. I will say, just kind of messing around with them quickly, and you know, just doing a kind of quick comparison, I would say that actually there's not much with this guy in the robot mode anyway that would make me think, you know, obviously I've got a you know, big masterpiece collection, so that this guy does kind of fit in that regard, but there's not a lot about this dude that would make me think as a standalone piece, if I just wanted a hot rod toy, a modern hot rod toy, that I would choose this one over this one. I don't know. That's just my preference, I think, but it feels like that's maybe the way it's swinging. There's definitely a lot to like about this guy. I think for me personally, this bot mode still takes it, I've got to say. But, you know, that's not to say that the one is definitively better than the other and that the Studio Series is trash or any of that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just saying that I think my preference is still leaning towards MP28. But no doubt they definitely still have their strengths, and there are ways that the Studio Series quite clearly improves on certain aspects of the masterpiece, I would say, even though still my preference sits with MP28. Anyway, that's me trying to add a bit of nuance to the debate, right? Like, it's me trying to not just be like, this one toy is definitively better than the other in every way, or whatever it is that people are saying, because, you know, for my money, that's often not the case. You know, you can get two toys, different toys of the same character, one has strengths, the other has strengths, they both have weaknesses. It's not always that cut and dry, realistically, is it? Do you know what I mean? And I don't know, internet discourse sometimes will have you believe that one is clearly the victor or whatever else, but realistically it's all subjective stuff. Like, it's all, you know, it's all opinions, whatever. And here there's definitely no right and wrong. You got two good toys there. Anyway, let's go ahead and check out Transformation on the Studio Series toy and see how we get on. Much has been made about how wonderful it is, so I can't wait to see. Right, that's Transformation done, and I can totally see what all the fuss is about with the Transformation anyway, because it's a lot of fun. Very, very creative, entirely unexpected in places, and yeah, just kind of clicks together really nicely. So I'm all for it. Now, the main area that causes a bit of intrigue is the chest, which kind of flips round and then clips back up again, and it's really cool. I like it a lot. And yeah, I've not seen that particularly on, certainly on any kind of previous Hot Rod toy quite like that. I mean, we've had some really creative ones. You know, MP9 is exceptionally creative with how it transforms. And this, you know, follows in that kind of vein. I think it's a very smooth transformation on the whole, and a lot to like about it. And you know, it's interesting because I had said in a couple of recent you know, War for Cybertron or Generations reviews that I was kind of missing that satisfying click-clack together of a lot of those toys. You know, I kind of had anticipated, you know, that kind of fiddle former thing where you can kind of transform them really swiftly and it's all really just kind of fun. And you know, I didn't get it with stuff like, I mean, the most egregious one for sure was stuff like Earthrise, you know, the Battle Chargers, which just had that kind of squishy feel to them. This is not that at all. Everything kind of clicks together very solidly. It has a definitive place. It feels like it sort of tabs very nicely, and yeah, no, it is satisfying for sure. Perhaps the one real exception to that is this bonnet section just there, because it does feel like it doesn't sit particularly flush. Like you've got a little bit of a quite a sort of obvious gap just down the side, just there. You know, this arm piece here, it's the top of his arm, doesn't quite go into the side of the bonnet that smooth, and yeah, it doesn't quite line up. It's the same on both sides. I have fiddled with it a couple of times already, and yeah, I can't kind of get it to go. And consequently, it does feel like he just about sits on all four wheels, and wheel will roll. I didn't think he was going to initially, but it's a bit unforgiving, like you have to get it just so. But certainly on the side here, that is the best that I can get it. On the whole though, it's a pretty nice vehicle mode. I mean, it does a great job at kind of bringing Hot Rod to life in toy form in this car mode, and it looks pretty sleek. The spoiler sits very far down actually. I would probably kind of like that raised up, not much, but just like a couple of millimeters almost, because it kind of gets lost in the rest of the car a little bit, in the kind of silhouette of the car. But it does have a kind of Batman vibe to it a little bit as well. The back wheels are very kind of hard to discern, and then you do have some very obvious robot mode legs kind of hanging out the back, the knees just there. That's the kind of worst bit of the car mode, if anything, is the back end. Otherwise, it's all kind of good stuff. Just also noticed a bit of paint slop or something going on. I don't know if it's scratch paint or paint slop just on the wheel there. You know, in the silver, you can just see a bit of black kind of hanging over. That's it's a little bit unfortunate. It doesn't present particularly nicely. I mean, the wheels are actually not too bad. They're obviously not rubber or anything like that. Just kind of these clip-on wheels, but they're fine. They kind of got a little bit of wobble to them. Yeah, that coupled with the little bit of visual gap there, it's not the best. I didn't even mention it in regards to the transformation, but I do really like the way they use this is actually a fake bonnet, or is this the real bonnet and the other one's fake? I don't know. You decide. But it doesn't really matter. But yeah, it's very cool the way that this kind of flips around and whatever else. The engine itself is obviously painted silver, and that looks okay. I do miss the chrome on some of the Masterpiece versions, but you know, again, people have had issues with the chrome on MP28, so swings and roundabouts, I guess. The lights here look really nice with the kind of orange paint. The flames are cool. I don't know. The flames aren't quite right for me. Like, there's a little bit too much of a curve at the edges of the flame almost, so it doesn't quite work. I feel like, I'm just looking at some of the other versions, I feel like MP9 and particularly MP28 got it really kind of spot on, and this is just a little bit more stylized, but still, I mean, that's such a minor nitpick, it's not even true. I feel like the windshield works really well with this translucent blue. It's a really nice color, looks fantastic, just leaves enough detail kind of hanging through, and although you can kind of see the robot mode head and stuff through there, you know, you wouldn't know. It looks like interior detail, if anything, so yeah, that's pretty cool. I feel like one element that doesn't work as well is this very obvious little yellow kind of hinge just there, and I don't really know why it's not red, to be honest. You know what I mean? It would just be better being the same color as the rest of the car, in my opinion. And it just kind of makes it stick out a little bit and kind of breaks up the vehicle mode, if anything. I mean, the same is kind of true with here with the little hinges, the grey hinges just there. Why not just make them red? You know, it would look so much better. But hey ho, it is what it is. And generally speaking, the arms do kind of pack away very nicely. I think they've done a good job with that on the whole. Nice bit of silver paint on the sides here. And actually this section, I do think that tabs in very securely and looks very uniform. It's one thing on a number of Hot Rod toys, this doesn't always kind of carry over very well, and they've done it well here. But yeah, certainly it's the knees that are the kind of weakest point of this car. It's fairly obvious as well. It's definitely let down a little bit towards the back end. The front half is more spectacular for sure. On the whole though, he's a nippy little racer. I mean, is it the definitive Hot Rod alt mode? No, it's definitely not. But it's good enough. You know, it's for the toy, and considering how fun the transformation is, you know, the end result is definitely not perfect, but it's satisfying enough, I would say. It's fine. You know, it's definitely not going to kind of be a match for some of the other versions that we've seen. Not even maybe the original, I would say, actually, but we'll do a comparison in a minute. But still, I do really like how sleek it is. The general kind of shape of it is really, really nice. It's by far and away not the worst one I've seen either. It's just maybe like a little bit squished in proportions in places. Kind of the length maybe feels a little bit squished, but on the whole, you know, it's very, very decent. Now, you can utilize his guns in robot mode as well by pegging them into the kind of just the bonnet just there, into the engine. That's very common on a lot of Hot Rod toys, but it's fair to say that they often look better than this. You tab them in on the sides, these little pegs just there, and I don't know, it just looks weird. I don't know why they do both like that. It's kind of very, very strange. But hey ho, it is what it is. Of course, if you really want, you can put the pizza cutter thing on there as well, but honestly, I have no idea why you would want such a thing. Alternatively though, you can relocate the guns to the roof, and actually I think that works a lot more successfully in some ways. It still looks a little bit ridiculous, but it's better than the bonnet, let's say that. Of course, if you really want, you can also place the pizza cutter on the top here as well. Stop trying to make this happen, all right? It's not gonna happen. It just looks ridiculous. It just looks ridiculous. Then you can use the little blue translucent pieces on his exhaust at the back just there to make it look like he's, you know, he's going so fast that his blue flame is coming out. Why not? Sure. It works absolutely fine, honestly. Now, in terms of comparisons of the vehicle mode, here he is with the original 1986 Hot Rod again, and yeah, it's interesting because I still got a lot of time for this thing. It just looks absolutely amazing, and you know, stuff like the chrome, the rubber tires, even the stickers, all of that kind of stuff, it really kind of elevates it a lot. And I do find it weird, you know, when you see toys from 35 years ago that just kind of feel better quality than the ones now in many ways. Do you know what I mean? And it's that's not at all to say that the SS version doesn't feel good. Do you know what I mean? Because it does. It feels nice on the whole, but there are just elements that really kind of elevate that original in a lot of regards. And you know, maybe people that weren't into G1 at the time, or you know, kind of don't have that kind of love for G1 toys, I think sometimes those are elements that kind of get missed over a little bit. But no doubt there are also things around this one that are very, very sleek. It's just that this original toy is so good that it's an interesting comparison. Let's say that. I think you know, they definitely both got their strengths. Entirely different toys though at the end of the day. Then here he is with Masterpiece MP9, and in his Hot Rod mode again. Of course, it does also transform into Rodimus Prime's vehicle mode, but this alt mode for me is about as perfect as they get. I mean, it's large, it's too large for Masterpiece scale, so you don't see it used very often, you know, because if you line it up next to, you know, your Optimus Primes and all of that kind of stuff, it's just too big, purely and simply. But still, it's absolutely glorious. I just think, woof, spectacular. And I really love the transformation on it as well. So I would say that these two both have exceptionally creative transformations to get from one mode to the other, you know, and maybe some of my favorites actually in that regard. A lot of people are down on MP9 again because of the QC, you know, the old QC problems, but I, you know, with this copy, don't have any of that. So this guy, for me, MP9, very, very attractive vehicle mode indeed. And then of course we've got MP28 here, and I love this vehicle mode as well. I don't know what to say. It's just so sleek, really nice kind of, you know, kind of sleek design to it. Love the color on this thing as well. I do think that actually that's maybe up there for kind of my favorite color on a lot of the Hot Rod toys, whereas actually I'm not as keen on the Studio Series color. It's a bit too red for my liking. I kind of wish it veered into the little bit more of the kind of pink or magenta or whatever the color is. I don't know, I don't really mind. You know, I'm rubbish with naming colors, but yeah, it's interesting. This one for me is a very spectacular vehicle mode, and things like the chrome and all of that. Yeah, it has started to wear a bit on my copy. I wish that I'd kind of sealed it at the time, or you know, done something with it to kind of protect it, but still very, very spectacular. Really love how that looks. Realistically though, it's fun to see them all lined up together, and nice little fleet of Hot Rods just there. Actually, one thing I have noticed is that the SS version, the Studio Series version, takes a lot more of the kind of color from the original toy, like the darker windshield and things like that, whereas actually the two Masterpiece versions, not only are they a much more kind of pinkish red, but they have that lighter blue canopy as well. So that's really interesting, just to see kind of where some of the colors come from. I do prefer the color schemes on the Masterpiece versions, typically speaking. But yeah, really fun to see them all lined up together. 4 great iterations of the same character, you know, all done very nicely. Who's complaining at the end of the day, right? All of which leads me to say that I really like this toy on the whole. What else can I say realistically? It was never going to be any other verdict, was it? You know, it's not perfect by any means. There are grumbles that I could have about it, and if I really wanted to, I'm sure I could kind of nitpick it to death a little bit. But you know, on the whole, what it does well, it does very well. It's a lovely robot mode. It's a nice vehicle mode, definitely not perfect. Like, I do have some grumbles about the vehicle mode, but hey, it's fine. The transformation for me is really the best bit of it, and I guess in that regard, you know, kind of, as I say, coming back to this idea that what I was really after was some sort of Generations, you know, sort of fiddle former style toys. I think in that regard, it's definitely going to satisfy that need. Do you know what I mean? To just have something kind of fairly easy to transform, but fun and creative, and it's a good toy, man. Yeah, it's a 2. Now, as already mentioned, today's review comes courtesy of TF Source, so I will put a link to their site in the video description, so you know you can go ahead and check him out and treat yourself if indeed you fancy it. So, and do drop me a like for today's video, that would really help me out. And what are your thoughts on Studio Series Hot Rod? Do you like him? Not like him? Do you prefer the Masterpiece? Do you not prefer the Masterpiece? I'm sure some people will say that, but let me know what you think. Otherwise, that's it from me, so enjoy the rest of your day, and TTFN.